Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Jason Howell and I talk to Wired's Damon Beres about how the DMCA affects the ability for blind readers to consume ebooks. Then we talk to Rai Christ of CNET about Amazon joining the group of Matter and Thread devices, which will hopefully bring a future smart home that is truly interconnected. Before we round things out with our stories of the week, first it is Squid Game cryptocurrency. That whole thing is fake. And, well, another fake. We heard that Facebook was going to be backing away from facial scanning, but what about its parent company, Meta? Stay tuned for all that coming up on Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 208, recorded Thursday, November 4th, 2021.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike harnesses the power of every click, every action, and every ally to grow stronger and stop cyber threats before they can stop you. Join the fight and experience the power of Falcon Platform for free today at crowdstrike.com/twit.
And by Command Line Heroes, an original podcast from Red Hat that tells the epic true tales of developers, programmers, hackers, geeks, and open source rebels who are revolutionizing the technology landscape. Season 8 is out now. Search for Command Line Heroes on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to podcasts.
And by Udacity, get the in-demand tech skills you need to advance your career. Visit udacity.com/twit and get 75% off any program with code TWIT75. Limited time offer. Hello, and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am one of your hosts, Mikah Sargent.
And I'm the other host, Jason Howell. Good to see you, Mikah. We've got a busy day. We're doing TNW right now, and then I'm hopping on Smart Tech Today with you in a little bit. So it's like the Mikah Jason twofer.
It is indeed. We do have a busy day planned ahead of us. So I suppose we should dig into it, eh?
Let's do it. All right. So copyright law, no doubt it exists for a reason, obviously, to protect content creators. And let's also be real, the people who distribute that content, they probably end up with a lion's share of the profit, yada, 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 but that's another story. There are times when copyright law interferes with differently abled people's potential consumption of that content, right? Like, hopefully, if you're creating content, you want to reach as many people as possible. Sometimes copyright law gets in the way of that, but there are ways to make that content consumable for all. It just kind of requires a lot more work. And I thought this topic was really fascinating. So I invited Damon Beres to join us, who wrote about this for Wired. Welcome back to the show, Damon.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You bet. It's great to get you here. So what we're talking about today specifically has to do with the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and some exemptions. But let's start with the act itself. How is... I guess give a little bit of a brief kind of rundown as far as like what it is exactly and how it's preventing people with print disabilities, which is what you wrote about specifically, from reading things like ebooks.
Yeah, so the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or the DMCA, is this old law that was signed in 1998 that essentially, of direct concern to this topic, it has a lot to do with anti-piracy measures. It is essentially an act that was created to help protect, as you were saying, content creators, publishers, distributors who were concerned about their content essentially getting ripped off in digital space. A kind of top concern when this was created was like people distributing like MP3s, ripping music from CDs, that kind of thing, which should give some impression of how old this law actually is. And as it pertains to people with disabilities, which is what I wrote this Wired article about, there's this exemption process that is baked into this act that essentially gives some leeway to people who break digital copyright protections, digital rights management, that kind of thing, for the sake of making copyrighted works accessible. And it's this process that recurs every 3 years where advocates for people with disabilities and other advocates essentially petition to renew exemptions that protect people who actually have to go through the process of breaking DRM, et cetera, to make works accessible.
Okay, so right now we're kind of in this ongoing pattern of every 3 years doing the renewal of the exemption, and through reading your article, kind of got a better sense of just how much work that actually is. It's not an easy process by any means, but no doubt, after all this time, it's obviously. This exemption obviously exists for a very sound reason, for a good reason, to open up that accessibility to more people. What stands in the way of making this a permanent exemption? Is that even a possibility? Is that anything that the powers that be are discussing making happen?
Yeah, it's interesting. Of course, there is a ton of interest in securing like a permanent exemption, or otherwise enshrining the right to accessible digital material in law in some other way. So there's a couple of things floating around here. So the first thing is that there is this kind of ongoing conversation about Dmca reform. So as I mentioned, this law is quite old and was really created in a different era of the internet with very different needs in mind. And what this 3-year exemption process was put into place for was to kind of, the intention was to kind of keep things current, essentially. So for example, this year, one of the other exemptions or recommendations that was kind of made as part of this rulemaking process actually expanded the exemption for breaking copyright on consumer technology for issues related to repair, et cetera. And that's a very kind of current conversation. And so there's this kind of good intention behind this exemption and renewal process that theoretically allows for sort of modern considerations in the DMCA. But for people who kind of know that there is this ongoing need for accessibility. So in the case of the piece that I wrote, people who are working on behalf of people who are blind or have other print disabilities, that is never really going to change. And digital works like ebooks need to be accessible. So what a lot of people are agitating for is either a reform to DMCA that would permanently enshrine these rights, or there's also this notion that there could be a law passed that requires publishers of digital works, of ebooks, to make sure that their text is fully accessible. So in the EU, for example, there's the European Accessibility Act that will be enforced starting in June 2025, where publishers are actually going to be forced to make their works fully accessible, which would then sort of circumvent the need for there to be these DRM tampering programs and all of these third-party measures to make works accessible, because the publishers would just have to do it themselves. So that is a potential path around this exemption process. And
okay, so I could understand, regulation obviously is a really great way to make things happen when they aren't happening on their own. Is the process of making this content more accessible, is it a matter of expense, difficulty, both? Like the publishers obviously, are resisting to a certain degree. Otherwise, they'd be doing this all the time. You pointed out many times in your article how even things that are put out as ebooks aren't necessarily always put out in a way that TTS systems can break down in a sensical fashion for people who need them. What is the missing incentive there for them to just do this themselves anyways?
It's a really interesting question, especially because in some cases, publishers actually do the work, but it doesn't translate to every platform that the book is actually sold on. So there's an example in the story where there's like an e-textbook publisher called Cengage that has its own platform that it sells books from, but it also sells on Amazon and other ebook services. And what happens here is Cengage does have a fully accessible version of a textbook on its own platform, but if someone was to buy the e-textbook from Amazon, they're actually not getting that same accessible text. It's a different format, and it doesn't have text-to-speech and alt text enabled. And so for someone who needs an accessible text, they need to go to the first-party platform. They can't get it from the third-party vendor. And it's kind of unclear to me why that is. I talked to the company several months ago in the summer when I first started reporting this piece, and they said, oh, we're working with Amazon to try to make this happen. But then as of last month, that same inaccessible textbook is on Amazon still. So what I think it is, it's a matter of resources to some extent. I mean, it does add a layer of work in certain cases. So take this calculus textbook, for example. There's a bunch of illustrations, figures, graphs, that kind of thing in this textbook that would need someone to kind of go through and append alt text to. And alt text is essentially what would allow a readout of that image to someone who can't actually look at it on the page. So if it goes over the image, it'll describe, this is a circle with, half of it filled in or something like that, for example. So that does require work, which does mean money. And then there are these logistical concerns about making sure everything is kind of standardized across platforms, which means maybe they have to create things in multiple different formats, which is more time and perhaps more money. And maybe they don't want everything to be enabled on a third-party platform, or they're maybe not getting as much of a cut of the sales. At the end of the day, there are all of these logistical concerns that complicate this. And because publishers don't have any legal requirement to make these works accessible, it's kind of easier to say, well, let's not actually go through all of that work and spend that money and do this and that. They kind of scrape by with doing the minimum in a lot of cases.
Yeah, which, I mean, they're not alone. This situation is by no means the first example of that, right? Often companies are going to do the minimum, especially if it takes time and money to do the alternative. And then you also talk a little bit in your article about some of the creative ways that people on the other side are working around these restrictions, whether they're allowed to or not, by the definition of this of the DMCA and the exemption that we're talking about here. Maybe like what are some people doing in order to get around this, and why is that? Is there any risk involved with that, I guess?
Yeah, well, the sort of easiest way to explain it is oftentimes, in order to make a work like an ebook accessible, it requires the use of breaking that digital rights management or that digital copyright protection and using a third-party program to extract text, for example, to use optical character recognition software, which is essentially actually the new iPhone update, right? If you take a picture of text now, the iPhone it allows you to highlight like text in an image. So if you see a restaurant sign, for example, you can copy that text. So that kind of baseline optical character recognition technology has been in use by people with print disabilities for quite some time. So oftentimes what people have to do is take this text that they've purchased and use a program that basically breaks the copyright protection and extracts text and translates it into a format that they can actually read it in. And there isn't like a risk to that per se, only because of the exemption process that we were talking about at the top of the show, which is this essentially an exemption that allows people to be protected when they break this digital copyright management for the sake of creating an accessible work for themselves. But without that exemption, then this would not technically be legal, which of course would come with risks. And, the argument against this kind of thing is that people who break digital rights management often do so for reasons related to piracy or distributing files illegally, et cetera, which is why this is kind of concern to publishers and other digital content creators.
Yeah. Well, it's a fascinating piece. I love learning about, we have the opportunity to talk about accessibility, stories from time to time on the show. And I feel that it's important to kind of shine a light on these things, because it's very easy for the majority of us to not even know, the struggles and the challenges that happen behind the scenes. And this is a really good example of that. Damon Beres, really appreciate your time. The article can be found on Wired, but I'm looking at your Twitter profile right now, and I'm noticing editor-in-chief Unfinished Media. So congratulations, because I think that's relatively new.
That is, yes. Yeah, it is relatively new. Thank you. Stay tuned for more on that.
Yeah, indeed. And folks should find you on Twitter as well. Is it DL Beres? Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
All right. At DL Beres. Thank you so much, Damon. Always a pleasure getting to talk to you.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care.
You too.
All right, up next, Amazon has joined up with other major tech companies to usher in the future of the smart home. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by CrowdStrike. You've seen the headlines, and we talk about it all the time here on TWiT. Ransomware attack after ransomware attack, holding businesses hostage. It can feel like it's only a matter of time before they come for you, and you'll have to decide, do you pay? Or do you lose everything? But you can have a third option. Do you defeat your adversaries before the fight even starts? Sorry, I always get very inspired at that part. It's so nice to hear that there is a way to defeat them. With CrowdStrike, you're not alone in the battle against ransomware. A secure future demands a shared defense, and that's why CrowdStrike's Falcon platform uses their threat graph powered by advanced AI to analyze behavior on your devices, servers, and cloud workloads to find the threats and stop them. Their security platform delivers the industry's most powerful set of tools to fight today's most sophisticated cyber attacks, all delivered via the cloud through a lightweight, intelligent agent. A Forrester study finds that Falcon Complete delivers 403% return on investment, 100% confidence. Oh, and we got to talk with the CTO, Michael Santonis, and he explained how the Threat Graph system is a collaborative platform.
It's the crowd in CrowdStrike, and that's the concept. The original vision was to build the fundamentals. It was to bring in all of those signals, that telemetry, and the more data we get, the more information that we have. We can use that to protect all of our customers in real time.
CrowdStrike harnesses the power of every click, every action, and every ally to grow stronger and stop cyber threats before they can stop you. Falcon Complete stops breaches every hour of every day through expert management, threat hunting, monitoring, and remediation, and is backed by CrowdStrike's breach prevention warranty. And they don't just say it. They guarantee it for Falcon Complete managed customers who receive a warranty covering up to $1 million in the event of a breach. Terms and conditions apply. Gartner Magic Quadrant named CrowdStrike a leader for endpoint protection platform for 2021. Join the fight and experience the power of Falcon platform for free today at crowdstrike.com/twit. That's crowdstrike.com/twit. CrowdStrike, because what we've built together is worth defending together. Thanks so much to CrowdStrike for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. Now let's talk about the future of the smart home. Look, We've heard it 100 times, maybe 1,000 times, at least folks who've paid some level of attention to the smart home, that there's going to be some way to bring all of these smart home gadgets together, to finally have them cooperate, to finally have them listen to each other, sort of a therapy session among smart home gadgets. And time again, it just ends up being a fragmented marketplace. And you've got this protocol over here and that technology over there and this communicating with that and not it goes on and on and on. But as much as I hazard to say it, we may finally have what will be the one protocol, the one group, the one working group to rule them all. Joining us today from CNET, a smart home connoisseur, a fantastic writer of all things smart tech. It's Rye Chris. Welcome to the show, Rye.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here. Been a while. Yeah. But definitely talking now about Matter. It is promising all the things you're saying. It's trying to be that new one standard to rule them all, to bring everything together under a common language, and to be that sort of skeleton key for the smart home. And it's a really open question about when it lands next year with all these devices that are probably going to be jumping on board, whether or not it can do all the things it's promising in terms of providing that unity, or whether it's going to be just more of the same in terms of devices that work together and you can have your choice of voice assistant, but at the end, there are still lots of walls in that walled garden. So it's a big question about how much of an impact it's going to make, and it'll be one of the big stories of 2022 when Matter gets here.
So let's talk about kind of the state of the smart home now. In your history of reviewing smart home gadgets and kind of understanding them, we've got Wi-Fi, we've got Bluetooth, we've got Zigbee, we've got Z-Wave. Are there any other protocols that I'm missing from those that have kind of existed in the past leading up to now?
Yeah, I mean, those are the main ones. You can look at other names like Insteon, and, there's Clear Connect from Lutron and other little kind of fragmented ones out there. But those are the big heavy hitters in the connectivity space. And the one that I would also add would be Thread. And Thread is an IP-based mesh networking language, and it's been around for several years. And it's a big part of what Matter is trying to do. Matter is actually going to work on top of Thread. So devices that are already established as Thread bridges, and they call it border routers, things like the Eero router from Amazon works as a Thread router, so it can relay Thread signals. Next year, it'll start using those Thread connections to relay Matter signals as well. So if you have Thread devices in your home, I think Matter is important and worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen a few companies start to implement this Thread technology, newer for some. And as you pointed out, of course, Thread kind of came by way of Nest, where Google scooped up Nest, and that company was already working on a way to sort of have these different devices communicate with one another over a protocol backed by IP. And I know, this gets a little nerdy, and so I do want to try to keep it as general as possible here. But the point is, in kind of this modern way of doing things, you've got Wi-Fi communication, Bluetooth communication, and in some cases, Ethernet over kind of IP-based communications to talk to these devices. And the promise of Thread itself is what runs contrary to what we have right now, where the more devices you add, the kind of worse the system gets because it gets overloaded. In a Thread network, the more devices you add, the better it gets as it starts to create that mesh network. But what I'd like to have you kind of explain to our listeners is, in particular, Matter itself, because you've got these companies, Amazon, as you wrote about, has said, hey, look, we're going to be enabling this on our Eero devices, these routers, and Thread, of course, is enabled on a lot of those already. We'll be adding one of our Echo devices later on, and then perhaps some even later after that. But the Thread is one protocol along with a few others that Matter kind of blesses. But when it comes to consumers, when it comes to the average person, what do we know right now about Matter and what can be expected? Is it that I can talk to Alexa, the Amazon assistant, I can talk to the Google assistant, or I can talk to Siri, and any of those will control the devices in my home? Or is it more just an awareness of these different devices? Kind of what is the outcome of having all these companies working together?
Oh, I mean, a couple of things. I think that the first really big, important point about Matter is that so many important names in the smart home and in the home in general. You're talking Kroger is on the Matter, not the board, but the number of companies that are supporting it. IKEA, Samsung, Texas Instruments, ASSA ABLOY, along with Amazon and Apple and Samsung and Google. They're all agreeing that this is a good idea and that they're on board with making it work. So that's a very good thing. That portends well for Matter to have an impact. But the question about what Matter specifically is going to mean for the average consumer in terms of what can my smart home do that it couldn't do before, I don't know that there's going to be a whole flood of new integrations that suddenly make the smart home 1,000 times better. I think it's going to be much of what consumers are already used to, with a few minor improvements in some specific integrations. Things like TV casting is something that I know Amazon has really pointing out that a lot of TV manufacturers are on board with Matter. So when you're trying to cast stuff using your voice assistant to your TV, there might be some smoother, better controls for that. But it's not going to be that everything is all of a sudden the same. It's not going to be a singularity, I think. Every manufacturer is still going to have their different special features that they want to keep to themselves as incentives for people to buy in with their platform. If you use HomeKit Video to stream video on your phone or on a smart display, they have a multi-view feature where you can look at different camera things. You're not going to get that feature on an Amazon smart display or a Google Assistant smart display because of Matter. It's not going to unify things in that way. But it is going to make it so that developers, the people making the gadgets and making them work with everything, they have a lot less work to do to get their gadgets to a point where they work with all the big players. It used to be you have to get on board with Alexa, you have to get on board with the Google Assistant, you have to get on board with HomeKit, and these were separate avenues that all required developers to put a lot of effort in. Now with Matter, you just get on board with Matter and you're going to get much of all of that. You're going to have devices that work at least on some base level with all of the major voice assistants and with SmartThings and all the major smart home players you'd want them to work with. And that means developers are going to have a lot more time and energy to make better devices, quite frankly. So in that way, I think it could accelerate the smart home and mean that devices take a lot less time to get fully polished, to get to that place where they feel like they're for everybody. But in terms of features, we don't know the specifics of what all Matter is going to bring to the table. We'll have to wait till next year to see what devices do with it.
And is this going to be one of those systems where we'll see sort of badges on products where you'll see, okay, this is a Matter device, this is a device that works with Matter, where different manufacturers are able to print that on their packages? Or is it more of a, because I'm thinking of sort of the badge that says works with Apple HomeKit or works with the Google Assistant versus where you kind of had to flip to the bottom of the box and look at the different protocols that it supported. That's a little less clear. Do we know anything about the marketing aspect of Matter as it stands?
Yeah, I think you're definitely going to see a Works with Matter badge next year appearing on devices that support it. Matter has a logo that's a little green triangle with 3 black arrows kind of pointing into the center. I kind of think of that logo like the 3 voice assistants, Amazon's, Apple's, and Google's, all kind of pointing in at a similar bullseye in the middle, this standard that brings them all on the table. But you're probably, I would say almost certainly going to see that green logo start to appear on all sorts of gadgets in that smart home aisle at Best Buy or wherever you're shopping.
Got it. And of course, Matter, the software development kit isn't out yet, won't be out until 2022. But one of their, as I said, blessed protocols, which is Thread, is available in certain cases. One is the implementation of HomeKit over Thread. And then if you've got some Nest gadgets and different devices there, you also may have some experience with Thread. Has CNET been able to experiment with any of these Thread-enabled devices, and what has been your experience with them in terms of connectivity, latency, ease of use, et cetera, et cetera?
I haven't personally gone too deep on Thread in a big, complicated setup with a lot of different devices, but that is the pitch with Thread, that it's this mesh network where every device that you add is actually improving the system's ability to send messages back and forth between devices. And also the fact that if you take a device out or add a new device, it's very adaptive, very good at quickly reconfiguring that mesh so that every device has a really clean channel back to whatever your kind of home base is on your network, your router, if you have some sort of bridge for your devices. So Thread is designed to be good with that. And it's been around, like I said, for several years and has enjoyed pretty good success in terms of not really messing anything up. Thread hasn't had any problems where it's been the reason that a smart home has stopped working, or where it's had headaches with interoperability between devices. So it just seems to be a pretty smooth protocol that sort of works quietly in the background to make things a little better. I can't say specifically from any tests that I've done how much better, but people who use it seem to like it. So I think it'll be interesting to see how Matter enhances Thread's ability to be a selling point, really, for devices like these.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you stopping by. Of course, folks can head over to cnet.com to check out your work. But if they want to follow you online, where should they go to do so?
You can follow me on Twitter. The username is @RyChrist, just my name. And would love to field your tech questions or share all the CNET stories we write on there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ry.
Thanks, Mikah.
Thank you, Ry. All right, coming up, crypto scams. Got some interesting stuff to talk about there. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Command Line Heroes. This is an original podcast. You've heard us talk about it before from Red Hat. Command Line Heroes tells the epic true tales of developers, of programmers, hackers, geeks, and open source rebels who are all revolutionizing the technology landscape, and really offers a unique blend of historical context and current trends that are really shaping today's technology landscape as well. This season tackles a question from every angle. One single question: what is a robot? Is it a servant, a factory worker? Is it a prosthetic, even a vehicle? And why do we actually build robots that look like us? Why do our robots have to look so much like us? And we often ask whether we can actually trust robots. Trust is big in technology in general right now, but especially with robots. And can robots trust us to do what's right for them? Will there be an uprising? I don't know if we're going to hear a whole lot about an uprising, but this is kind of where this all leads, right? Like, is there trust in what we are building? And, vice versa. Science fiction tells us many stories about robots. In the future, they're going to serve our every need. Maybe they're going to develop a mind of their own, turn against us. Maybe they're going to be the savior of humanity, or they could even be our downfall in ways that we can't comprehend right now. Well, season 8 of Command Line Heroes covers the robots that are in our midst and the determined dreamers who are bringing them to life. It's 8 episodes that compare the promise of science fiction to the reality of robots today. I had the opportunity to listen to the first episode of Robot as Servant, and it's just fascinating. You got to hear a little clip. Here you go.
While making this season, we discovered a robot reality that's pretty removed from the robots we imagine. And yet, all those misguided ideas about what a robot should be actually shaped what robots are. And no robot fiction shaped things more than the story we told ourselves about robotic servants.
I think one thing I really love about this podcast series as an audio geek is just how elaborate they get with the sound design tied to the topic and everything. It just really enhances the listening experience. So yes, you're learning something, but it's also really engaging. This award-winning podcast is hosted by Sargent Barak. It's produced by Red Hat, of course. Season 8 is out right now, so you don't have to wait. You can search for Command Line Heroes right now on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to podcasts. We'll also include a link in the show notes. My thanks to Command Line Heroes for their support of Tech News Weekly. All right. It's a crazy ramshackle world of crypto out there. You got to be careful, folks, where you're investing your fiat. We've been hearing all about Squid Game, for the last couple of months. Squid Game, of course, is Netflix's incredibly popular. I think it's their most popular internally produced series. I thought it was pretty good. Not amazing, but the show was pretty good. I can understand why everybody's so energized around it. I've even actually seen my kids playing a Squid Game in Roblox, because Roblox, we talk about the metaverse in this show from time to time. Roblox is like an example of metaverse right now, at least one example. And so there's just millions of different, I don't know if it's millions, but a whole lot of different games produced by, a whole lot of different users. And there are Squid Game ripoffs. So it's even hit the kids, even if they haven't seen it, because it's very inappropriate. Anyways, what am am I even talking about? Something like this is very in the news, is my point. It's very now, and there's a lot of attention around Squid Game. And so where there's attention on something that's very now, there's also opportunity for scams and for people to kind of manipulate others who are so tied into whatever that thing is that that builds excitement around other things that are connected to it. So enter cryptocurrency. Here we are. Was a token called Squid, and it was inspired, yes, by Squid Game. It was promoted as a payment system that would be tied to a new game that was also inspired from the show. So it'd be like a Squid Game-ish show, in no way, shape, or form tied to Netflix at all. So this was not like a legitimate, we're working with Netflix to create this crypto coin and, this video game that it ties into. The website for the token shared all the usual stuff. So if you ever go to a site, to research about a particular crypto coin, you're going to find things like a white paper. You're going to find things like an audit on the landing page, all sorts of information. You might find notable people, giving their, talking the coin up. Well, the website had all the usual stuff. It had a white paper. It had an audit. But Gizmodo was early in on this last week, sounding the warning bell. They had noticed that the site itself had, all sorts of spelling errors. They noticed that there were really strange elements of the white paper. Yes, spelling errors, but also just these really, the translation was off. Just a whole lot of red flags reading through the white paper to kind of prove that it might not be as legitimate as it's saying it is. The site had an endorsement from Elon Musk, which was really actually
what? That wasn't real, right?
It was his endorsement of the show, not the coin. But the site apparently had it anyways because, hey, when you're operating a crypto scam, you take what you can get. It also, there were things like a Telegram and a Twitter account that would hint at, the ability for the community around Squid to kind of communicate with each other and everything. But the Telegram was locked down. The Twitter account, any of their posts were locked down so that the normal people, could not reply to its post, which, if you're operating a scam, would be a very good way to not allow the people who were scammed to tag on.
Right.
And on top of all that, Gizmodo shared the fact, and this might be the biggest red flag, that the people who bought Squid had to do it on a decentralized exchange, which is not in and of itself, at all bad, called PancakeSwap, which is a pretty popular one. But they found when they did so that they were able to put the money in. They were not able to pull the money out. There was no way to pull the money that you put into Squid out.
No, folks.
That's about as big a red flag as it gets when you're talking crypto.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Yeah, so it's all these things, right? This was last week. Gizmodo even wrote it up saying, hey, the BBC, Business Insider, they're both writing about this because it's in the news. Squid Game's in the news. And hey, what do you know? There's a Squid cryptocurrency without really scrutinizing or calling attention to all of those red flags. So, big ups to Gizmodo for doing that and kind of calling them out and saying, hey, maybe you should be a little bit more, scrutinizing with your coverage. And yeah, it hit at its peak $2,861. Suddenly on Monday, dropped down to zero, which essentially meant that the creator had cashed out the crypto for real money, which totaled around $3.3 million to be exact. No one's been able to contact the people behind it. And that's where we stand. So I thought it was just an interesting story. It's a very now story. It's very easy with cryptocurrencies to be caught up in the, as they say, the FOMO, the fear of missing out on these things, because it's so incredibly highly speculative. And then inside of that speculation, there lives the world of speculative crypto that actually has some real community scrutiny happening, but healthily so. And then there's this other class where it's total opportunity grab by someone who just knows how to spin up a crypto coin and apparently capture $3.3 million in the process.
Good God. That's so frustrating. Because I already have my complaints about cryptocurrency in general and the way that it can be, used and the way that it's all kind of funny money anyway.
Yeah, it really is funny money. It feels that way.
And so to have people going as far as to take advantage in this way just really, what really grinds my gears? This is what really grinds my gears. It's, I struggle with this because it just hurts my heart. And I don't, it's like, I don't want anyone messing with anything. You know what I mean? So that, I don't know. I don't know what to say about this. There's other than people, I wish people wouldn't do this, but people can do this and may be able to get away with it. That's all there is to say about it.
Well, yeah, and especially in something, like crypto, it's a very unregulated thing right now, right? And these decentralized marketplaces make it such that anybody can really spin up a coin. And they're not all scams by no means, but the scams do happen. And so you as a speculative investor, and by the way, do not take your investing advice from me. I am at the bottom of the rung on any of this, so I'm just kind of giving you my opinion. But you have to really be certain that you feel comfortable. It's almost like I think of crypto the way I think of gambling at Vegas. If I'm going to Vegas and I haven't been in a long time, and the last few times I've been, I didn't gamble. But if I'm going to Vegas and I'm planning on gambling, my number one, the number one thing that I know at that point is I can kiss this money goodbye. This money that I'm using, I accept the fact that it will not exist at the end of the day. And if it does, that's like a surprise to me. That's kind of how I feel about crypto. It's like there's no guarantees with anything, but in crypto, it's so volatile and it's just all over the place. You really never know. This isn't even the first time that this has happened, of course. Earlier this year, the Mandalorian spawned a Mando coin that ended up being a total pump and dump scam as well. So just a general word of caution. Like if you're seeing a coin, do your own homework, do your research before you throw any money in there, except the fact that if you're throwing money in there, just assume that money is gone. And if it's not, hey, it's a surprise. Not bad.
I guess if you go into it expecting that you are losing your money, then it's okay. But then why even do that? Why? Well,
it's true. I mean, the why even do that ends up being because if you strike gold, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess it's just gambling. That's true.
It's total gambling. That's how I feel about it. If you end up picking this total alt coin, that's new on the scene, and each token is worth 0.000000001 cent, right? So you can become like a Mando bazillionaire with like $10, that you've invested, or $100. If you're okay giving $100 into this thing, and strangely enough, 5 years from now, that thing ends up taking off and that becomes a penny for a token, you have made an insane amount of money. And that's what people are doing, largely the speculative investors in crypto. That's what they're hoping for. It's not much money now, but maybe eventually some random thing will happen and it'll go to the moon, as they say. So yeah, weird stuff. But anyway, my word of warning.
There you go. Yeah. Let's just let this be a big word of warning for everybody.
Yeah.
All right. Up next, you may have heard that Facebook is shutting down its facial recognition system, but that doesn't mean the company that makes Facebook is. I'll explain that in a moment, but first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Udacity. Udacity offers you an online education program that is geared toward people looking to take their tech knowledge to the next level. Udacity has specialized and exciting content that can help take you further in the career you want, and they offer the latest cutting-edge nanodegree programs you can't find anywhere else. Udacity is here to encourage your career growth. They want to provide you with information about the career you want give you the skills for that career, and then help you get the job. Don't let the pandemic stop you from improving your skills either. One Udacity graduate had lost his job at a local Nigerian airline due to COVID-19, so he decided to turn things around for himself and applied for the Machine Learning Scholarship Program from Microsoft Azure. Within just 6 months of receiving the scholarship, he transitioned into a career as a data analyst. Check out one of Udacity's top 5 nano-degree programs: data engineering, product manager, data analyst, data scientist, and programming for data science with Python. If you're looking to get into the most cutting-edge technology careers, you can get nano-degree programs in AI, flying car and autonomous flight engineer, intro to self-driving cars, machine learning engineer, robotic software engineer, and more. Yeah, they've got some pretty awesome courses there. Udacity's courses are created with partners and industry leaders in Microsoft, Google, IBM, AWS, and more. And I love this. The best part is that they select team leads at top companies to be the instructors. So you're going to get the right knowledge from the experts who are working in that field every day. When signing up for a nano-degree program with Udacity, you can expect courses to be project-based with active learning that lets you test your knowledge, homework and projects that will be reviewed by qualified professionals, real human feedback and reviews with access to mentors 24/7, and flexible schedules where you choose what works for you, whether it's 5 to 10 hours a week. It's at your own pace, and you can graduate in as little as 3 months. If your team needs to master cutting-edge technologies like data science, AI, and cybersecurity, well, check out Udacity for Enterprise. You can upskill your entire workforce with real-world project-based learning. Check out the Enterprise section of Udacity's website today to learn more. Get the in-demand tech skills you need to advance your career. Visit udacity.com/twit and get 75% off any program with code TWIT75. Limited time offer. That's udacity.com/twit and enter TWIT75. Thanks so much to Udacity for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. I wanted to talk about a story that hit the feeds earlier this week. It was a couple of days ago in the New York Times, and it was about Facebook saying, hey, we are going to be shutting down the facial recognition system. The company said, there are lots of societal concerns about doing face scans, of detecting different people's faces and building out a sort of facial profile for them. And so we want to shut this down and then delete the data on billions of users. This was a feature that was introduced in 2010, according to the New York Times. And essentially how this worked is that up to that point, when they first introduced this feature of tagging people, it could tell that there was a face there, and then you could select that face and say, this is this person. So my mom posts photos of us kids at Christmas time, and she, tags the kids who have Facebook accounts on there. And then on my Facebook, people, if I set it up, could see photos of me that had been tagged. I can see photos of me that have been tagged, et cetera, et cetera. After a period of time, Facebook wanted to improve upon or increase the rate at which folks were tagging their friends. And so they introduced this deep face technology that would start to suggest for you. It would look at the photo and it would say, hey, I think this is your pal Constance. And you could say, yes, that's my pal Constance. Go ahead and tag this photo with Constance. So Constance will see this. And this feature not only recognized the face, but it started to build out, attached to each person's profile, a facial kind of graph, if you will, that would let Facebook's tool recognize you across different bits of the product and be able to tag. Well, Facebook said, all right, there's been a lot in the news and in society and other issues that makes us feel like this isn't a great tool to have. So we're planning on shutting it down and deleting. As the New York Times points out in its article, when the Federal Trade Commission fined Facebook a record $5 billion to settle privacy complaints in 2019, the facial recognition software was among the concerns. And last year, the company also agreed to pay $650 million to settle a class action lawsuit in Illinois that accused Facebook of violating a state law that requires residents' consent to use their biometric information, including their face geometry. But so you may have heard this. Cool, awesome. Facebook is going to be deleting this data. It's not going to be using this facial recognition tool. Good. Recode has come out with an article yesterday as we record this show, where they're talking about how, Facebook, owned by its parent company Meta, is backing away from facial recognition for photo tagging, but Meta is not, and in fact plans to not only keep its deep face technology, but also use it in its its metaverse products. So here is a little bit from this. Meta says that facial recognition isn't a feature on Instagram and its portal devices. Meta is already exploring ways to incorporate biometrics into its emerging metaverse business. So Deepface, the algorithm that it uses, will continue to be used in new ways. Of course, Facebook itself says, hey, we're going to do this in a way that is transparent, that gives users control of privacy and access to their data. But yes, there are ongoing concerns about the company still making use of this. And what the Recode article kind of suggests is that perhaps what's happened here is Facebook realized that having this facial recognition technology is just too costly for them because of the different settlements and lawsuits that it has faced. And it would keep, faced, that's a bit of a pun. And so it would keep this if it wasn't for that. So it's almost as if it's just kind of it's a pause on things until the future comes forward, and they're working on the metaverse and they can kind of retool the agreements and what goes on there. But I think that when I first saw this, and I saw other people kind of reacting to this, when we all first saw this, or when many of us first saw this, we thought, oh, that's great. Facebook's getting rid of this. There's a lot of issues with facial recognition and concern there. So good on them and good for us. But there's just that underlying story that I think is important to be aware of here.
And it kind of also seems to me to speak to probably, and we talked a little bit about this on This Week in Google yesterday, a little, part of the reason that Facebook has rebranded or renamed or whatever you want to call it. I'm still kind of unclear on exactly what you call that, but to Meta from Facebook, it has to do, must have to do with the fact that Facebook as an entity that is constantly in the news gives the company a certain name for itself, or rather, there is already a built-up kind of understanding of what Facebook is, bad or good, but there is none of that associated baggage with Meta. And stories like this, I feel like what I saw everybody talking about was the fact that Facebook was shutting down its facial recognition system. What I have not seen a whole lot of people talking about is that Meta plans to still do it. And I think that it kind of is indicative of the fact that our eyes and our attention are so used to shining the spotlight on Facebook, the company that can do no right, that continues to, intrude on our personal, safety online and our privacy and this, that, the whole laundry list of things. And it really plays to Zuckerberg and the company's advantage, the fact that they've done this, because, I'd be really surprised if the Meta news, Meta still, kind of attaching themselves to this possibility in the future, if this gets as much attention as the other. And in the eyes of the everyday person, guaranteed they're not going to really pay close attention
Right.
to the meta news. They're still dialed into the Facebook news. And so, I think it's interesting. It totally, that plan totally works. And I think it even works for people who are smart enough to not allow it to work in ways that we haven't trained ourselves yet. We have a lot to learn as far as that's concerned, but
I agree. Yeah, I think it's I'm displeased with the amount of kind of look over here, not over here stuff that's going on.
Sleight of hand.
Yeah, exactly the sleight of hand that's going on. And, I was talking to Mary Jo Foley on Windows Weekly yesterday before the show kicked off about Facebook and the metaverse. And one of the things that we immediately saw among tech journalists was a guffaw and a snarky tweet or a, sarcastic response. I'm sure I was in watching the event was immediately drawn to having that same reaction to Facebook's plans for the metaverse. And what the mistake is in doing that, and I give credit to Casey Newton for kind of talking about this first and foremost, is regardless of whether we think that the metaverse as it is and Facebook's particular form of it is going to be successful, it will be a place where people do go and do exist and do partake in some of these things. And given the way that many of us in tech feel about Facebook, simply poo-pooing it and waving it away and saying ha pshaw and moving on, it kind of runs contrary to our built-in job as journalists, our creed, our ethos. Our job is to shine a light on things and bring to light different parts of it. And so by just discounting it and tossing it aside and not paying attention to it and saying, oh, that's not going to be successful, Facebook can continue to do these things that it's done in the past that haven't been great and get away with it if we all are just too busy going, So keeping an eye on it every step of the way, reporting on it every step of the way, being aware of what's happening in and out, asking questions, and helping to shape it through this kind of this continued the goal of the press, then I think that is something that we should all be aware of and try to be mindful of. And so that's one of the things that I do like about having multiple all of these different, there's complaints sometimes about how there are all of these different sources that you have on the internet. And yes, that can be an issue. But, the New York Times reports one thing and then Vox's Recode doubles down on it and digs into it and talks more about it. And I like that those things can happen. And so you can get this viewpoint that quickly has some more information as you need to about that thing. That's good. I don't know. All of that's to just say that we should continue to do our jobs and not let this technology just pass us by in a way. We don't all want to be old folks. What is it? What is the old folks standing in their yard looking at the clouds or something? I don't remember how that
yells at a cloud. Yeah, right.
Yeah, people yelling at clouds and griping about our yards or whatever. Anyway.
Yeah. So true. But it's exhausting. It can be exhausting at times. It's like,
trying to keep up with everything. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's the difference between kind of your personal belief about something and the importance of being reporting on all things and talking about all things and considering all things, even amidst that exhaustion. I think that sometimes happens for me. I reached a point last week where I was just like, so much everything in the news is Facebook right now, and I've had it. My brain can't accept any more Facebook news. But I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about. It's kind of hitting that saturation point. The instinct that I had in that moment was to pull away from it. And that's when even worse things can possibly happen. So good reminder. Mm-hmm. We have reached the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. We publish every Thursday. All you have to do is remember twit.tv/TNW if you want a place to go on the web to find all of our shows. But what's even better is if you go there, you'll find all the links to subscribe, and then you don't have to think about it anymore. It just comes to you like magic. It's amazing. twit.tv/TNW.
Also, if you'd like to get all of our shows ad-free, well, we've got a way for you to do that. Doesn't that sound awesome? For $7 a month, you can check out Club Twit, which gets you access to every Twitch show with no ads. You'll get your own little personalized feed of all the different shows so you can subscribe to them. You'll also get access to the Twit Plus bonus feed that has content you won't find elsewhere, outtakes, behind the scenes, before show, after show, above the show, behind the show, etc., and access to the members-only Discord server, which is a place you can go to hang out with those of us who are part of Twit and also your fellow Club Twit members. And those conversations are often popping and hopping across the different channels that we have in the Club Twit Discord. All of that available for $7 a month. And I think even better than the Discord or the ad-free stuff is that warm, fuzzy feeling you get knowing that you are supporting us directly. You listen to us each week, and this helps us keep the show going. So thank you to those of you who have subscribed and to those of you who will subscribe. And then we also got some feedback that some folks want to support their specific shows directly. They didn't really need all that extra stuff, but they just wanted to say, hey, this is a show that matters to me and I want to support it directly. If you are an Apple Podcasts user, you'll be happy to know that for $2.99 a month, you can subscribe to the audio feed of any Twitch show. And with that, you'll get an ad-free version of the audio feed right there in your Apple Podcasts library. If you would like to follow me online, you can find me at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network, or head to chihuahua.coffee, CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. Check out Smart Tech Today later today with my pal Jason Howell as we cover the smart tech news. And then next week, you can check out on Tuesday, iOS Today, which I record with Rosemary Orchard. What about you, Jason?
All right. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Jason Howell. If you go there right now, you'll see a link at the top that links to my Movember fundraising, basically a way to shine a light on mental health and men's health and why this thing is growing on my chin all month. So we'll see how that goes. But just go to my Twitter profile at Jason Howell and you can find a link. It's the easiest way to get to it. Big thanks to Anthony for filling in as TD behind the scenes. So it's good to have you here, Anthony. Also, thanks to Burke and John at the studio for testing people. And I think actually Ant was testing people as well. Everybody pitches in for this show. We really do appreciate all that y'all do. And we appreciate you for watching and listening each and every week. We'll see you next Thursday on Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
So you got yourself the brand new latest and greatest iPhone or Samsung smartphone because you heard about all of the beautiful photography those things can create. But for some reason, you're just not quite getting it done when you try to make your photos. Or you got yourself a brand new camera because you were interested in getting started in photography. But your little new inexpensive camera still isn't quite cutting it. Well, you need to check out my show, Hands-On Photography, here on TWiT. I'm going to show you how to be a better photographer and a better post-processor, and quite frankly, just help you get the most out of that new camera that's either on your phone or the brand new one that you just got for your birthday or gifts or what have you. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So head on over to twit.tv/hop. That's twit.tv/HOP and subscribe today.